Welcome back to Twisted Tales of Murder. Serial killers ask for a lot of strange things. However, one that you may not expect is that this man asked to die. But before I discuss this iconic killer, please subscribe and like today. Also, the videos include several questions I would like to hear your thoughts on regarding different crime-related topics. In 1977, at the age of 37, Gary Mark Gilmore became the first person to be executed in the U.S. in 10 years. He died by a firing squad after he fired his legal team and waived his rights to another appeal.
This morning on a death row case in Utah 42 years ago. The national media covered at the Converge at the Utah State Prison to witness the execution of Gary Gilmore. In 1972, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled capital punishment was unconstitutional, but that changed only 4 years later. For every crime, there's a story, and the truth matters. Here's ABC4's senior crime and punishment correspondent Marcos Ortiz with the Justice Files.
Gary Gilmore, who was convicted of murdering two people in Utah County, became the first person to be executed in the United States after the U.S. Supreme Court reversed itself. Gilmore gained international attention, and his story was even made into a movie.
Gilmore was born in Stonewall, Texas on December 3rd, 1940. He was one of 4 children and came by a life of crime honestly, as he was raised by parents Frank and Bessie Gilmore, who sold ads to non-existent magazines and kept the profits for themselves. What amazing parents. The family moved around a lot, as Frank was always trying to avoid detection. Frank was not only a con man, but he was also an alcoholic who was a rage-filled and abusive father and husband. It came as no shock that Gary Gilmore, at the age of 10, was already showing signs of trouble. Gary may have reminded his father of his inadequacies, and thus Gary received the brunt of his father's abuse. Then, at the age of 15, Gary was caught running a stolen car ring in Portland, Oregon, and his father not only bailed him out of jail, but also hired his son an attorney, resulting in him getting off with only a warning. Although that was likely not the correct choice, as Gary went back to stealing cars only 2 weeks after he was let off with a warning. He was sent to a reform school in Oregon, where he became the perfect criminal. This leads one to question, is reform school, such as the one Gary attended, helping people or simply making them into better criminals? Tell me what you think. After, quote, graduating from reform school, it was not long before he was in prison. He was sentenced to 15 years in the Oregon State Correctional Facility for armed robbery. Gary makes me wonder about the long-standing discussion between nature versus nurture. Nature refers to how genetics influence an individual's personality, while nurture refers to how the environment, including relationships and experiences, impact one's development. The debate over whether nature or nurture plays a bigger role in personality and development is one of the oldest in psychology. If Gary had been given a better chance in life and not had criminal parents or a father who was physically abusive, would he have turned out differently? Gary was allegedly brilliant, who had a high IQ and was gifted in the arts. So do you think he was always going to be a criminal? Or did his experiences and upbringing make him a criminal? Gary hated prison, and he attempted suicide 16 times while he was incarcerated. He even went as far as swallowing a razor blade in one of his more gruesome attempts. Gary was released on parole on April 9th, 1976, and he went to live with his aunt in Provo, Utah. It was there that he met 19-year-old Nicole Barrett. She was a mother who had already been married 3 times and had 2 children. It's hard to imagine that she'd already been married at such a young age. It only took 6 months for Gary to become violent with Nicole. And when she broke things off, he flew into a fit of rage and held up a gas station attendant and ended up shooting him twice in the back of the head. While he shot the attendant, allegedly he stated, "This one's for me. and this one's for Nicole. He only walked away with $125. The victim, Max Jensen, had been a married law student with a child. That was not the only life Gary would take. He killed a hotel manager the next day. But Gary, like many criminals that came before him, became cocky and careless, and his cousin ended up helping confirm suspicions the police had. When Gary confronted her, she stated, "You killed someone on Monday and committed another murder on Tuesday. I was not waiting for Wednesday to roll around."
The 1982 movie, The Executioner Song, brought to life Gary Gilmore's moment in criminal history.
This one's for me.
24-year-old Max Jensen was killed by Gilmore in 1976 at a service station in Orem. The next night, Gilmore walked into a motel in Provo. Night manager Benny Bushnell was shot and killed. Gilmore walked away with the money. Gilmore was arrested after someone saw him throw a gun into the bushes right after the motel shooting. 3 months after he was arrested, Gilmore was convicted of capital murder and ordered to die. University of Utah law professor and former federal judge Paul Cassell has followed the case for years.
What made the Gilmore case death eligible was that it was a murder for money. It was an armed robbery.
Gilmore's execution would be the first in the nation since the U.S. Supreme Court declared it unconstitutional in 1972. Then it reversed itself after death penalty laws were changed.
Utah, other states passed new modern death penalty laws. Gilmore was the first case in which one of those new modern death penalty laws was carried out.
From the outset, Gilmore wanted to be executed and chose the firing squad instead of hanging.
I simply accepted a sentence that was given to me. I've accepted sentences all my life.
His desire to die was followed, but others wanted to save his life. His mother filed an appeal, but the U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear her plea. His execution date was set for November 15, 1976. At 8 in the morning.
It was unlikely that Gary could have been rehabilitated, as violent offenders, like Gary, have a higher recidivism rate than nonviolent offenders. For example, 63.8% of violent offenders were rearrested for a new violent crime within 5 years of being released. That's compared to 39.8% of non-offenders. So, Gary Gilmore once again found himself behind bars, this time on murder charges. During his trial, it only took 2 days for the jury to convict him of first-degree murder. In regards to Gilmore's case, the district attorney, Noel Wooten, stated, "One of the things I thought at the time but didn't argue was that if he had been given life in prison, it would be the same as locking him up in a cage like a gorilla. But even at the zoo, somebody goes in the cage and cleans up sometimes." Given this information, Wooten thought the only logical conclusion was that the man must be destroyed. That is a very jaded way of looking at things. It also makes me wonder if our society will ever become so negative and damaged that we will start charging admission to prison so that people can see others locked up in cages. Comment and tell me your thoughts on this. Then, at the sentencing, Gilmore only said one thing: "I am finally glad to see that the jury is looking at me." And he was sentenced to death. What do you think he meant by that? When Gilmore's lawyers tried to appeal his case, he fired them. He said he wanted to pay for his crimes. Many organizations, including the NAACP, tried to step in and help him. Gilmore became angry with this. It had been the sanction of the court that he die. Gilmore stated he simply accepted that.
Traditionally, there have been 5 men on the firing squad. Those men are armed with high-powered rifles.
But against his wishes, the ACLU intervened and blocked the execution on 3 occasions. Their main objective, it would open the floodgates for executions nationwide.
It would lead to more insanity around the whole issue of the death penalty. And And the implementation of the death penalty is indeed an insane issue.
But Gilmore wanted the ACLU to stay out of it. The governor twice issued stays of execution. He wanted the Board of Pardons to decide if death was appropriate in Gilmore's case. During the Board of Pardons hearing in November of 1976, Gilmore made it quite clear.
It seems that the people, especially the people of Utah, they want the death penalty, but they don't want executions. And when it became a reality, they might have to carry one out. Well, I started backing off on it. Well, I took them literal and serious, and they sentenced me to death.
The stage of execution angered Gilmore. In November, he attempted suicide, recovered, but tried again the next month. His execution was now set for January 17, 1977.
While Gilmore was awaiting his execution, he attempted suicide many times. The first time was after a stay of execution was issued. Clearly, he wanted to die. The second time was when his girlfriend came to visit. And I ask again, why do women keep picking this type of man? I don't understand. Anyways, she smuggled in drugs and they both attempted to overdose together. The girlfriend survived, as did Gilmore. Then Gilmore chose to go on a hunger strike. Yet people and organizations kept trying to save him. Why do you think they did that? Then, the night before his death, friends and family gathered in the prison, where Gilmore was served steak, potatoes, milk, and coffee. Watch my video, Death Row Inmates' Last Meal, to find out more about the last meals inmates had. Gilmore was also given 3 small bottles of Jack Daniels that his uncle smuggled in. Why are people able to smuggle in all of this contraband? It was clearly the 70s. Gilmore only consumed the liquids. Apparently, he had no appetite for steak and potatoes. The next day, on January 15th, 1977, at 8:07 a.m., Gilmore finally got his wish, as he was executed by firing squad at Utah State Prison. What do you guys think is the most gruesome form of execution?
National and international media converged at the Utah State Prison. Protesters held vigils. The ACLU made one last attempt to save his life, but it was denied 30 minutes before his execution. An ABC reporter described Gilmore's last moments.
The warden, having read aloud the legal order that Gilmore must be shot for his crime, asked quietly for any last words. Gilmore said, "Let's do it."
Now, the order of the Fourth Judicial District Court of the state of Utah has been carried out. Gary Mark Gilmore is dead.
At 8:05 in the morning, Gilmore's wish was carried out. He was shot 4 times through the heart. Reporters were given access to where Gilmore was shot. They took pictures of bullet holes posed in front of the chair. The ACLU was prophetic. Since his execution, capital punishment is now a way of life.
Gilmore signaled that in modern America, you can have a death penalty statute that survives constitutional scrutiny.
Gilmore murdered 2 people. He was a convicted killer. His own uncle once called him a coward, but the same uncle was his last visitor before he was shot.
It was very upsetting to me. But he got his wish. He did die. And he died in dignity.
It was another 19 years before there was another execution by firing squad in the U.S., and it took place at the Utah State Prison when John Albert Taylor was executed. After that, the legislature changed future executions to lethal injection. For the Justice Files, Marcus Ortiz, ABC4 News.
Time magazine would later report in their January 31st issue that in an old tannery known as the Slaughterhouse in the southwest corner of the Utah State Prison is where 36-year-old Gary Gilmore was loosely bound to a chair, and only 26 feet away hung a cloth partition with 5 slits. Hidden behind this curtain stood 5 riflemen armed with deer rifles, 4 of them allegedly holding a steel jacket shell, and the final one a blank. This was done in hopes that one shooter would not take the ownership of the kill shot, but instead all the men could think they had the blank. Gilmore's final words were, "Let's do it." According to the medical examiner's report, Gilmore's body had 5 gunshot holes in it. Thus, there was no blank, meaning all the shots were fatal. Nearly a decade later, Gilmore's once girlfriend, Nicole Baker, who is still trying to recover, she stated, "When I met him, I felt like I had always known him, and I felt like I had always loved him." Nicole stated that she's tried to move on to new relationships, but found herself telling the new boyfriend, "I think I'm still in love with a ghost, and I always will be." I think she needs to spend some more time in a hospital. One notable takeaway from the case was that the advertising agency working for Nike at the time stated that the "Just Do It" slogan was inspired by Gary's last words. Do you think anybody received the royalty checks for that? Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed learning about a killer who asked to die. If you have not already done so, please subscribe today to Twisted Tales of Murder. Till next time, stay safe.